If I asked you to think of early IBM PC compatible machines, you might think of Compaq, Hewlett Packard, Pac Bell, stuff like that. You probably wouldn't think of Columbia Data Products, even though Columbia Data Products was arguably the first company to make a IBM compatible machine. And although they weren't the first to market with a portable, that we mostly attribute to Compaq, they gave Compaq a run for their money with this, the Columbia Data Products 1600 VP. And I have a boxed example that I want to share with you with a interesting story from the original owner. And here it is on the bench, and this is a absolute rock solid beast of a machine. Columbia Data Products released this VP machine about 1882, 1983, and it was a direct competition to the Compaq Portable and any IBM or IBM compatible machine. But let's talk a little bit about IBM compatibles and what that means. So in the early 80s, if you were buying a computer, you were probably going to buy an IBM, something from IBM, an Apple, or some other machine with its own infrastructure, maybe a CPM device, maybe an Osborne or whatever. But because of how popular IBM machines were and the vast library of software, a lot of companies, instead of coming up with their own infrastructure, their own ecosystem, they made a machine that would run IBM software, hence IBM compatible. And a lot of these machines were vastly cheaper than buying a computer from IBM. And that's a whole reason why this machine itself was bought. You see, I found this on Marketplace, Facebook Marketplace, a couple years ago, and it was just a picture of the box, like you saw earlier, that said "old computer." And well, I'm all for old computers, so I hit the guy up, and it was actually the gentleman's son who was selling it on behalf of his dad. Gave me address, went over to the house, and the gentleman who originally bought this came out. He was an older gentleman, and he was liquidating all of his machines, right? At one time, he had 15 of these portable computers because in the early 80s, he had an accounting firm and he wanted his clients to be able to take their machine and either, one, work from home, groundbreaking at the time, or go to their client. And remember, they're accountants, right? So they would be able to go to their client and pull up the accounting software and work for them in their house, in their business, wherever. And from what he said, this machine at the time was the most competitively priced machine that would tap into all of IBM software. But more importantly, he bought it over a Compaq portable. And we talked about this for a little bit because he didn't know Compaq. He didn't recognize the name, but because it was Columbia Data Products, data being in the name of it, he thought it sounded like a much more reputable company, especially when it came with computers. But one thing he mentioned, and anytime you look up Columbia Data Products, and it's a flaky company to research. It didn't have a very long life, but anytime you look up these machines, one thing you're going to find is the perfect software suite. And that's what I have here. And this gentleman recommended this suite as well because it comes with a bunch of manuals, a bunch of programs, Home Accountant Plus, he mentioned he used that, Operations Guide, Microsoft Basics, MS-DOS, and, of course, all of the software that you would need for this machine. Let's take a look at it. So we have MS-DOS, MPC Tutor, system diagnostics, asynchronous communications, fast graphics, and a database manager. And you got all of this with the machine. So you bought the machine and you had a bunch of software to get going already, including all of the other thousands of IBM compatible software on the market already. So it was, can I get this back in without messing it up? Maybe. So there was a benefit of buying an IBM compatible over an IBM machine, and price was a huge point. And when we're talking about 1982, 1983, there are not many portable machines on the market. So if you wanted a machine that ran DOS and would run all of your IBM programs, and a nice screen. This is a 9-inch screen, I believe. Yeah, 9-inch green or amber CRT. Unfortunately, this is the green one. Wish I would have got the amber one. But what more would you want in the early 80s for a portable, luggable computer? This has everything that you would ever need. So let's look at some of the specs for the machine itself. Like I said, it weighs 30 pounds. It comes with an Intel 8088 at 4.77 megahertz with an option for a math coprocessor. 128 or 256K of RAM. Now there is an add-on card. I have the card, so I have the full 256K. Two 5 1/4 floppies, an ISA expansion slot, which you can access on the back, and my gut tells me you could probably put 2 in here, and I'll show you that when we open the machine up. Parallel port, RS-232 serial, and like I said, a 9-inch CRT. This is the green one, but they also came in an amber version as well. And there is a front cover that the keyboard stores in. I don't have that out now because all the foam has just deteriorated on the inside, and I need to replace that. So let's take a look at some of the perfect software for this, and then we're going to open this machine up because there's some really interesting things inside, at least the way that it was designed, that I want to share with you. But this is, man, I would be happy with this machine in the early 80s, especially if I was going to have an accounting business like this gentleman did and be able to take this to clients and do everything. So let's get some software running this and see what it was like to use the perfect software. All right, so before we turn the machine on and actually look at any software, there is an Easter egg in this that I want to share with you, and it involves the RAM test. So we'll turn it on, and it's going to ask, do you want to check your RAM? Like most memory tests, we'll do yes, and then we're going to hold down S. And you kind of hear that little beeping, do, and it'll do that as it goes through every single segment of RAM. That's just a cool little Easter egg I would share with you, but let's reboot, and we're gonna go into some of the perfect software. All right, so it does have its own version of MS-DOS. This is 1.25, copyright 1981, 1982. So, and we see this is the Columbia Data Products Personal Computer DOS version 2.1.1. Put some date and time in there, and it's just like any early version of DOS that you would expect. But we are going to boot up the tutorial to this system. And we're going to look at the tutor disk. All right, so here we are in the Columbia Data Products Personal Computer Tutor program. So this would assume that you just bought your brand new machine and you want to know how to use it. So let's take a look at our getting started. And it just reads like anything. Chapter 1, go over handling the disk. You don't want to touch it or anything or bend it, stuff like that. Programs like this were really important in the early 80s. Why will this not advance? There we go. These are really important because a lot of people, this was their first computer, right? They don't know how not to treat floppies, don't flop them like that. But there's some things that you want to know how to use, maybe how to set up the disks in your system, or flipping around, changing directory to go from B to C. And that's why when you get a lot of these early computers, the manuals that come with them are incredibly extensive. I mean, this goes into different address ranges for memory, what is this? Status registers, right? These are things that you wouldn't expect to see on a modern computer today. But because this is relatively new and cutting edge stuff, we need to make sure that people knew what they were working and what they were getting into. Last thing we're going to do on here is look at the system diagnostic. So we need to actually switch disks, and we're going to go over to diagnostic here, put it into A. Is this going to let me reboot? No, it's not going to let me reboot. But can I do this? Test, maybe? There we go. So, this shows all of our installed devices, system board, 256 memory, keyboard, printer adapter, everything. That looks correct. We're going to say it is. And we're going to run the test one time. And it'll go through and it'll test your machine. And look at this. We want to look as I'm typing the machines. This is a really good program just to make sure that your keyboard works. What is that one? There we go. There we go. Keyboard's good. Now, if I had a color display, it would show these, but it does show that the line is blinking, so we'll say yes. And you get the picture. Look, it's screen correct. Yep. Kind of goes through testing all of the functions on your machine. And other than that, it's just like any other DOS machine. It'll run any DOS program that you have for the day that a machine of this type is capable of running. But this is really not the coolest thing I think about this machine. We're going to open it up and take a look inside because this machine baffled me for a little bit with the construction of it and just the way that it was put together. Now, this is an interesting machine to work on because it is built incredibly well. We're just going to open up the top, and you're going to see when I open this up, there's really not a lot to do. We have to keep going further. But I'm going to do a quick little plug for this Amazon Basics electric little screwdriver, USB-C powered. This has been a game changer. I've been against these for a long time, but this is, I love this. I highly recommend picking one of those up. Not sponsored, just do yourself a favor and get one of these. All right, so we're going to kind of turn this sideways. Hopefully you can see better, but when you first open the case, this is what you see. You have your CRT, your high voltage board, your power supply back here. So this is taking your line in, turning into DC, and then the housing for your floppy drives. Over here, right down here, that is your expansion card. So you could plug any expansion card in there, and the back plate is there, so audio, video out, whatever you would need. Now, where's the motherboard? Well, we have to keep digging. So a couple things you have to notice here. There's two L plates. This is one L, and this is another L here that sits inside of it. And that's where the front and the back chassis connect. The back chassis actually has the entire motherboard. So let's keep taking it apart. But before we take it apart, we actually have to disconnect the anode from the CRT because CRT separates from this. So give me 1 second to get all of my CRT safety gear, and we will get this disconnected and I can show you the motherboard. I showed this off before. This is my grounding strap. It's just a fluke test equipment. I got a gator clip there, put onto a probe. What I like about this is I can ensure that I have good grounding. That's not going anywhere. And then I can sneak my way safely in here and discharge and remove. There you go. Now we are safe. All right, a couple more screws, and then we'll be at the motherboard. This part always scares me on these machines because of how close the neck is to this bottom bracket. And you actually have to carefully lift the bottom part up and then out because there's little pins here that this sits on. Like I said, it is incredibly well-built machine. Oh, I missed some screws on the bottom. That will do it. Okay, now let's try. There we go. Okay, so it's separated. We're going to safely put the CRT aside. Okay, and now there is the motherboard. So a couple things. Looks very similar to any motherboard of the day, but as you see, we have a spot for our math coprocessor here. Here is my memory expansion card, and then here is a second unpopulated bus that we could plug another card into. I think that if you had another edge connector and you cut off the back for a hole or even reversed it, you could put another expansion card in here. I am willing to bet that. Now, one thing I do have to work on, and I posted in a couple forums, the codes on these chips here are not archived anywhere else. So this could be a different version of BIOS that is archived. I need to be able to archive these. Now, I've tried using check disk and pulling it off of there with no luck. I think really what I need to do is pull these chips out, get a reader, and dump them from there. But this is it. This is the entirety of the motherboard, and I believe this is the same motherboard that Columbia Data Products actually used in the 1600 desktop version as well. But overall, a interesting design, an interesting machine, and something I'm incredibly glad to have in my connection. So let's get this thing buttoned back up. By 1984, the IBM clone market exploded, and companies like Columbia Data Products found it very difficult to be profitable. By August of 84, they laid off 500 employees and found their stock delisted. When the IPO came out a couple years before, they were listed at $11, and early in 1984, they were down to 50 cents a share. And by 1985, the company filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. This is an interesting story because a lot of computer companies in the mid-'80s, like Columbia Data Products, just tried their hands. They wanted to be profitable. They wanted to get into the clone market, and not all of them made it. And that's why we see a lot of really interesting and zany clones from that era. But that's not the end of Columbia Data Products. They're still around today. In 1987, they switched gears and moved into software. You see, after they filed for Chapter 11, a Godfather Syndicate, it's the name of a computer company, the Godfather Syndicate, they bought all of CPD's physical products and they sold the computers and, provided support for the ones out there. But after that, Columbia Data Products shifted into the software realm, and they made SCSI software for Western Digital, and today you could find them in the data backup realm. So they're still around, not making hardware anymore, but they are still around. I think that's going to wrap this up. What did you think of the Columbia Data Products? Do you have one of these machines? Did you see one of these machines? Or do you happen to have some other obscure mid-'80s IBM clone that maybe not a lot of people know about? Well, I think that's going to wrap that up. As always, thank you for watching. If you like what we're doing here at Retro Tech or Die, like, subscribe, tell your friends, and we'll catch you next time.